Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the third and final season of Marvel's Runaways. With this situation, I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to just go straight into spoilers. If you're curious, should you watch this? I heavily recommend it. If you like season 1 or season 2, I think you're going to like season 3. They did a little bit different, I think, structure-wise to the story, but I still think it's very nice, especially the show goes in some very interesting directions. That's all there is to it. Just going forward, I'm going to be going heavily into spoilers, so you have been warned. So obviously getting into it, like I said, I do like the fact that this is structured a little different. I know it's weird to say, but I feel like season 1 and season 2, there were multiple threads at once, but it was all kind of heading into one particular direction. This kind of reminds me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because typically Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of designed like this, where it's one half of the season is all about this particular storyline, the second half of the season is all about this particular storyline. So it seems like they kind of did that, obviously dividing between the Gaborum storyline and the Morgan storyline. Obviously, probably go ahead and just talk about it. Obviously, the show, it was canceled last second. Obviously, if you look at the teaser, not unless I'm mistaken, but I don't remember seeing anything about this being the final season in the teaser. Maybe it was there, and I just don't remember, but I can't remember. Now I'm saying I said it so confidently, but obviously this is more so because of the shakeup at Marvel TV, just the new direction everything's going, which sadly just means literally everything is coming to an end, which obviously that's been kind of heading in that direction for a while now. I'm just kind of bummed, because you can look at this and you can definitely tell, obviously once again, not unless I'm mistaken, you look at this and you're like, they definitely had plans for more, just because there's so much that's heavily left open. Everything with Zavin and Elle, that was kind of a big plot point, and you can be like, oh, that's going to circle back into something. Definitely, without getting straight into it, but obviously the whole Alex storyline, that's definitely something where it's that's meant to be a major thing that they probably would have covered in the fourth. No, most likely would have covered in the fourth season, but regardless, let's kind of break everything down. It is interesting kind of picking this show up, obviously we're picking up right where season 2 left off with, obviously the magistrate has possessed these different people and they're looking for their fourth and everything like that. I'm going to be skipping around this, so I do apologize. There was actually kind of something interesting I thought was kind of a nice little plot point they made. Side note, I kind of went into this thinking oh man, all the parents were going to get possessed. I guess I'd forgotten the fact is that there was only 4 people on that. Well, there might have been more, but it seems like it was just, the whole point was it was just Zavin and the magistrate, so there was very few people on that ship to begin with. But still, the fact is, I guess it didn't correlate in my head, because it's been so long since I saw season 2. I thought there was going to be more possessions. I thought literally all the parents, at least the exception of one. I thought Catherine was going to be the only parent that wasn't possessed or something like that. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, like I said, I'm skipping around and stuff, but I like the twist where it was Alex. I had a feeling, just because of that whole AWOL situation last season, I was like, oh, that's probably Alex, because he had that quick shift to sorry, I don't know what came over him. I was like, oh, but then someone else had thrown out there, oh, maybe it's in Baby, and I was like, oh, maybe it is in the Baby, so I completely abandoned no Alex. So I was like, I should have kind of stayed with that. Because it does seem like the entire time, the son never came out until, the whole Catherine situation, which that was a kind of a hard thing, because I was like, wow. Because I almost expected Catherine to, wiggle her way out of that situation of find a way out of jail, because obviously she was trying to punish herself more so than anything, because she was trying to make Alex go hey, the fact is I am accepting responsibility for what I've done, but it's do you really call this justice? Because you're kind of like me, you're manipulating the system to get what you want, and it's because I think that was the thing too, since the beginning this show's been hinting to the fact is that Alex. And maybe that's almost why the son, it's almost poetic that the son picked Alex, because Alex has been heading in a direction where you can tell a little bit of, I think everyone has a little bit of their parents in them. I think you definitely see that this season, but the fact of the matter is I feel like Alex's situation has been slowly hinting to it. The fact is he kind of has a little bit of his mom and his dad, within him, but regardless. But circling back to what I was bringing up before, there was that line that I thought was kind of pretty sweet, where it's like, obviously they were trying to, rescue everyone, and, it's like, Alex is like, you really care about Carolina. It's like, yeah, she's the most important person to me. And Nico's like, I know that hasn't been the easiest day. Obviously, like, you brought us all together. I'm sure that's not what you want. But he was like, I wanted you to be happy. Your happiness kind of is what mattered to me. And the fact of the matter is, I guess I accomplished that. And I thought that was kind of a sweet thing. Because I think Alex has never 100% like kind of dealt with that. Like, I think it never came out too much, but I think there were always still lingering issues where it's like the whole, like, obviously he had feelings for Nico. It seems like it was dealt with, but I think there was still always that underlining thing of like, yeah, I think he never really talked to her about it. I think he talked about it with Carolina, but never Nico herself, So I just thought that was kind of, just kind of a little small thing. I was like, oh, that was kind of nice to kind of tell her that, I also thought it was kind of pretty neat, the whole like Zavin and Molly thing. I kind of wasn't expecting that storyline to turn into what it did, that they kind of became best buds and stuff like that, especially because Molly kind of like Zavin, as a warrior, from Zatar, and like you kind of bury your emotions and stuff like that. And I like that. I was like, it doesn't mean we don't have emotions, we just choose not to show them. And Molly kind of got Zavin to kind of let down her guard a little bit, and I thought that was kind of a neat element in her, kind of like the whole awkward smiling thing was so good because Molly, and she's just how it morphs like that. I don't know, I thought it was pretty dope, like that, like bond and friendship they ended up having. I also liked everything with the algorithms, especially when you look, because I thought like, oh, are we time skipping a little bit? Because I figured there was going to be potentially a time skip stuff, just because certain things in the trailer were kind of hinting like some stuff that was out of context. I was like, oh, is that kind of like a time skip thing or something like that? But I thought like the fact is it opens, I think it was Chase's algorithm that it started with, if I'm not mistaken. The fact of the matter is everyone's hurt and he's trying to save the day and stuff like that, but I thought it was going to be like, oh, that was going to be kind of the thing of like, oh, we got to go back and change the things. I thought that was going to be kind of like our Terminator moment or something like that, if I had to use an example. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, especially he goes all action hero and stuff like that, but then it's like, it's the algorithm, and you see Janet and you see Carolina's, which obviously Carolina's is the most like sweet, because obviously for Chase, it's like the thing he wants more so than anything. I think he wanted Gert to see him as a hero. It's kind of, he wanted to be her hero, even though it's like obviously Gert would not want that to be the case, and he even talks about it later on, like Gert would never want me to save her. If she tell me she doesn't need me to be her hero, that obviously that would be something super Gert would be super against, but I did like the whole Carolina thing of like, oh, I don't know, like the wedding and everything I thought was super pretty and everything. And it's also nice to know obviously that is where what was in her mind. And obviously Janet's dream of like obviously be like, well, wanting the recognition for her work, but also obviously like Victor being a better person, but still. It was also interesting too, learning that basically Jonah had basically never told either his wife nor his daughter or his son about the whole complicated situation. I mean, to be fair, they've been buried for, I think they said like 11,000 years, so I guess that doesn't come as any surprise, but still it's just kind of like interesting. Well, because it seems like despite all that he did, Jonah is the one that was the most influenced by humans because he spent a little too much time with them. I mean, considering the fact that he had Carolina, and then like because at first, because I kept wondering about that. It's like, oh, look at these three people we're going to feast on. I was like, Carolina is your daughter. Like, how are you going to handle that? And it was like, oh, why aren't we eating the blonde one? And I'm like, oh, I was like, they don't know that's your daughter. Okay, I see how this is. To be fair, the conversation comes up a little bit that Jonah was never the best father. And so it almost, I think it's a situation of probably with every new child, he shifted a little bit. It's like, oh, this new child's my favorite. Probably, because it seemed like, because obviously Carolina kind of was his light, but I think the whole thing is, when you actually look at it in the grand scheme of things, he does kind of move on, because it's like, oh, later on when he can't have Carolina, he goes to Elle, so it's kind of like, yeah, it kind of shows you like, oh, every new child is a new opportunity for him to basically screw up, but it's like, oh no, this child's too jaded about me, let's move on to the other. So I just thought that was kind of a neat element. It is kind of messed up though, just like to punish Carolina for being his other child. The fact of the matter is the mother like basically destroyed her like, well, whereas everyone else had to completely destroy their own like algorithms, like fantasy that was creating on their own. Like Carolina kind of got the rough end of it because it's like hers got destroyed in front of her, and they left Nico there just to kind of torture her a little bit, just because it's like, oh, I know this is what makes you happy. This is the person that makes you happy, so I'm gonna use this, to hurt you a little bit. I love the whole situation with Gert and Dale. I love that just kind of being its own little thing to a certain extent. It actually didn't come up too much during this season. I would have loved that to be something they kind of elaborated a little bit more on, is Gert and Old Lace's connection, in the sense that like what she did with Old Lace never came up too much. I mean, maybe it did and we just never knew it, but they never made a point of it again. Like the whole being able to kind of like drive Old Lace, that came up like once. But I did like that whole thing of like, obviously in Dale's mind it's like, oh no, I'm trying to start over with Gert. It's like the fact of the matter is it's not going to work like that. The fact of the matter is it doesn't take away from the fact that you're a murderer and I've grown. I'm not that same girl anymore, so I thought that was kind of, me, and even Dale kind of being like, yeah, I'm sorry. And I love that Stacy shows up and everything, but it's not Stacy, it's actually, it is Stacy, because she's trying to fight the mother that's inside of her. And I love her. I love it. It was just like, wait, where's that thing at? It's like, and it's the injector or whatever. No, it was that tranquilizer, and it's like, oh, where is it? And it's like, oh, I took it because I didn't want you to use it against me. And then like, what was it? I think even Stacey was like, well, that does sound like something you do, honey. And he was like, what? Why is it? No, why would you jump to that conclusion? And then later on, it's like, wait, it's empty. And Dale's like, oh yeah, I kind of emptied the ammo because I thought that you just in case you stole the gun. I was like, I love. There is no trust anymore. I mean, to be fair, we're kind of long past the whole trust situation, but still. I guess that should have been another hint later on. The fact is that Alex was able to read the abstract so easily and stuff. Like, I mean, to be fair, Janet deciphered it anyway herself, but the fact is it seemed like almost like instantaneous when he opened it that he was able to read. I was like, oh, I guess because I saw them, he was like, oh, it's like a math equation and stuff like that. I was like, oh, maybe, I don't know, because the whole thing, it seems like the sun didn't awaken until after Alex like broke down. Like, it seems like his emotional, like him trying to stay strong for everyone, like I think that's what kept the son at bay. But like the emotional toll it took on him when he found out his mom died, he was devastated. I think that kind of dropped his guard enough for the son to pick this opportunity to come up. But it seemed like he peaked up before, but maybe it was just like I said, at those moments of like a certain emotional toll. It's like, obviously last season he was super angry and he wanted to hurt AWOL. So I think that's what pushed him to kind of like, the sun kind of bubbled to the surface, but only enough that Alex was like, wait, what happened to me? Because he definitely didn't go through the same shift that everyone else did. Maybe he did, I don't know, because usually it was like a slower process for everyone else, and maybe it was there. Maybe if you watch it really carefully, you can't see the hints of it slowly happening, but like everyone else, like Tina and Victor and Stacy, you saw them kind of shift back and forth between who they were before, who themselves and these other, aliens possessing them. So I'm actually surprised the situation played out the way it did, because the way Zavin was making it, like, oh, once a Gaborum's like fully taking control of you, oh, that other person, they're dead. Because notice, like, they never shifted back to the other people. There was never any Victor, Stacy, or Tina. So I was like, oh, and especially when Alex got possessed, I was like, wow. Because I noticed that in the trailer. I was like, Alex isn't in this season a lot. I didn't think too much of it because like I said, at the time, I like convinced myself. I was like, no, it must be in the baby disc. I dropped the whole like it being in Alex. Like I thought in season 2. When I was talking about season 2, I was like, oh, no. It's got to be in the baby now. So, like, I didn't even correlate that together. But it's like, yeah, when you actually look back at the trailer, like, Alex is missing in a lot of that. I made note of that. I was like, that must have some significance. Or maybe it's just the way it was cut. It's like, I think it was to hide the point. The fact is that, everything that Alex goes through this season. So I thought that was kind of, an interesting element. Like I said, I didn't think about it too much until like it happened to be like, oh, that's probably why you didn't have them in the trailer much. I was like, oh, that's it. But my whole point was like, if he was possessed and it's like, oh, Gaborum's like, once they taken over you, there's no going back. I was like, man, that sucked. I was like, wow, are we really going to put ourselves in a position where we have to kill Alex? I was like, geez, I was like, I guess this is like death for all 4 of them, huh? I was like, I guess it doesn't, because there was never anything of like, well, we can separate. It's like, nope, it's a done deal. I was like, wow, we're going here. Holy crap, that that sucks. It was just kind of like a sad situation they kind of had to accept. I did like the kind of the molding of weapons and stuff like that. I even love Gert was saying like she was making this joke, going to be like, oh, kind of basically setting up this joke for an overcompensation thing when it came to Chase, and Chase was kind of like, oh yeah, I probably would have laughed about it. And then obviously like he reveals like, oh, his fistigons, he has a hidden blade and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, aren't you overcompensating? And he chuckles a little bit and turns to Gert, see, I told you that. She's just kind of like, all right, just let it go. That whole situation with Janet kind of caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess for her it's just kind of like, I guess either she accepted being in there, or maybe like the system had already kind of corroded her a little bit more than it had the others. Like the others were able to get out in time for their consciousness to still be there in their body. But I guess like her body, maybe, I think it could also be because, let's not forget, which isn't, I don't mean this in a disrespect. Well, she's an adult is kind of what I was about to say. She's older, like she's an adult. So maybe it kind of drained through her body a little faster than it did, Chase or Carolina. I almost thought when they were doing the whole thing and Carolina was like, whoa, something's off, I almost expected her to kind of lose her powers or something like that, because I was about to say, whoa, did that machine just take away your powers or something like that while you were trying, like you were pushing yourself too hard and maybe the machine fought back? But it's like, no, the moment she got behind Janet, it was like, oh, never mind, your powers are still in that. Because I'm about to say, like, is that what they're about to take that? But it's like totally not the direction they were going to take it, so. But like I said, I do like the fact of the matter is when it came to the whole sun situation, how they did keep you guessing, because like no one was like, yo, so the sun could literally be anyone, especially because even the magistrate was kind of like, could it be inside one of the kids? And so the fact of the matter is, for one, like the reveal of Gert and everything, I was like, wait, is that actually Gert? I was like, or is that Zavin in disguise? I was like, oh, that's gonna get annoying, I'm sure. But it totally turned out to be Zavin. It's like that shape-shifting ability super comes in handy, because it's like, I'm Tina, I'm so exhausted. Oh, Zavin ran that way. Oh, let me reveal myself. I'm like, that's actually pretty dope. I love how that could be tactically used like that. But for a second, I was like, whoa, it was in Gert. I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Especially because you're around Dale and Old Lace. I'm like, what does that mean? But then, like, I feel like they would have played into that more if it ended. Like I said, there would have been a little bit of more losing yourself. Like I said, maybe the situation is a little bit different because they're teenagers. Like I said, it seems there were hints of it, but I feel like Alex's situation was kind of all at once. It was just kind of like one powerful boom. Whereas everyone else's was a definite slow and steady process to a certain extent. But like I said, I probably missed a lot of hints to being like, oh, this is slowly taking him over. But regardless, I thought it was kind of interesting too, like, especially the way they were setting things up. I was about to go like, wow, like a lot of the parents aren't going to make it through this, because that would have meant like the only surviving parents at that point in time would have technically been Robert, Jeffrey, and Dale. I was about to say like everyone else got the axe. I was like, that's interesting. I mean, because it almost makes sense to a certain extent. Oh, and Leslie, it would have made sense to a certain extent, just because it's like, well, because their parents are technically evil and stuff like that. Once again, it's their parents, but it's that whole complicated thing of all that you've done, and it's like there's no like, oh, happy ending where we just walk away from this like, oh, this is, it's all good. To a certain extent, I really wasn't expecting that, so that's why I'm kind of like, I had no idea how they were going to play out the whole Pride situation. That's kind of what I was talking about. So like them potentially being killed off, I was like, that kind of makes sense, because there was like, there's no easy way to deal with that storyline, I would think, like to wrap that up cleanly, because it's like, do you go about there's still no like, your parents are like, obviously Alex is the one that was the most hell-bent on getting revenge against his parents. Like everyone else kind of had issues with their parents, sure, but he was the one that was the most hell-bent on revenge. And the argument could be made that his part of his desperation to take down his parents came from the son being inside of him and driving him to be a little more vindictive. Hence little hints that could have been like, oh, that was the son and not necessarily Alex. But regardless, but I did like they even went with like the whole thing of like, because even Chase is the one that suggested, he's like, well, how do we know it's not within the baby? And it's like, okay, so at least they're acknowledging, yeah, that definitely was a possibility, especially when the baby did that creepy ass thing and Leslie is looking at the sonogram and the baby actually eyes open up and glow. I'm like, that is super creepy as shit. And then like the baby like hands glowing and touching or something. I was like, that kind of hell. I think that was also meant to insinuate like, oh, Like, is this supposed to mean like the son definitely is in L? I was like, oh, that would be interesting, obviously, but that turned out not to be the case. It's actually interesting too. In a long skip, I was actually surprised that never got dealt with. The whole Tamar is the reason why Catherine got killed in jail. That never circled back around, especially when you actually think about the irony behind the fact is that Jeffrey and her kind of like that. I'm skipping around a lot, but like that became a thing. I'm like, it probably would have been something they dealt with in the future. They finds out somehow that like, oh, Tamar was behind all that. I just think it's kind of ironic. It's like literally when Alex isn't himself anymore, he ends up going to the one place he probably shouldn't be going to because that's the place of the lady who killed him. I mean, granted, it was just, once again, it was just not necessarily being justice, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I guess I should have seen it coming just because of the whole point they were setting up where she's like, oh, I want to see you one last time or something like that. And not necessarily see you one last time, but she wanted to talk to Alex and try to convince him like, oh, our family and everything. But it's like him telling her to go to hell and everything. I wasn't quite expecting her to get killed. I was almost halfway expecting her to kind of defend herself. But obviously she's not really a fighter, That's just not her thing. She's a lawyer. Like, she was never she did some of the dirty work, sure, but it was never to like, like I said, she just wasn't the fighter or whatever. So it was just like, I was almost halfway. I was like, oh, is someone going to save her? Like, especially with all that blood and everything, her being stabbed as much. I was like, for one, that's just like a sad way to go out. It was just like, that was just heartbreaking all on its own. I did like also that there was this element of, Chase coming back. He wasn't immediately accepted because they did kind of blame him because it's like, well, if it wasn't for you, you kind of paved the way for things to kind of turn into what they were because you went back to the parents. That led to the whole us getting trapped situation near the end of last season and everything. But to be fair, it was like, that wasn't his choice. That was kind of, he did kind of try to warn them, but even Molly being like, I know he's kind of a coward and he messed up. And it's like, hey, I'm kind of right here. You don't have to talk in third person. Yeah, I get it. Chase is such a coward. And it's like, I'm literally right here. I love that. And obviously what that meant for him and Gert, because the fact of the matter is Gert, obviously, she took him leaving harder, even though she wouldn't pretend like she didn't take it the hardest. She literally took it the hardest. And the fact of the matter is that he was, there was a part of her that was happy to have him back, but I don't think she was willing to really admit it because it would have meant admitting how much she missed having him around, But I thought it was also interesting in the grand scheme of things, the whole situation with, Zabin, where it ends up, because obviously Zabin had like, there was that whole thing of like her being so intent on killing Nico. It's like, oh, it's definitely got to be Nico because Nico's thing of like the way she's been acting and just like the shift in her, it's like, oh, that's got to be like the son, especially because they saw security footage showing what she did to her mom and Robert. So it was kind of like, that wasn't, but like the fact of the matter is like she was kind of losing time. She was losing herself. She was blacking out. So she's like, oh, this totally has to be the son. So maybe I'm possessed. And Zabin was dead intent on being like, oh, I'm going to stay around you. Carolina, because I want to protect you, because she was so dead intent on it being Nico, because I think it was a combination of, well, for one, certainty because of the way Nico was acting, but also from jealousy, especially because you could see the look on Zabin's face of like, oh, I thought, Carolina was supposed to be my beloved, because it's like, and especially that moment she had with Molly, I thought was kind of sweet, because it's like, but you said all this like stuff about destiny and stuff like that, but what if it isn't? But that was the thing. It's like, I believe so wholeheartedly in this, and so what if it's kind of like, I have to believe in this because I have to, talk about this destiny thing, me and Carolina, because if it isn't true, then what have I been believing in this entire time? Because she believed in this prophecy, this destiny so much, and it's like, if I don't have that, then like, what else do I have? This is all I've been holding my hopes out for. So it's like, obviously, and even her being like, oh, why is my face leaking? I even love like the fact is her, once again, her and Molly do the whole hugging thing, and I thought it was kind of like Molly kind of teaching her, the hug and all that, because I love Zabin extends out her arms. Like, isn't this the point where humans stretch out their arms to each other, and Molly kind of smiles and hug each other, because obviously at the time she was worried about Gert. So. But getting to what I was talking about, the fact of the matter is the prophecy being like, oh, the fact of the matter is the beloved you were looking for wasn't what you thought it was. Like, it was kind of a different, take on the prophecy that basically interpreted Carolina wasn't your destiny. It was actually Elle. Then my mind went to like, once again, this is coming from someone who's never seen Twilight. Just from where I've heard Twilight ends, I'm like, is this supposed to be kind of like Edward and Bella's daughter situation and the whole Jacob thing, I thought that was what it was hinting towards. It's like, no, like the fact is this child will be raised by another. I was like, oh, so Zavin's going to play like a mama role, especially because they literally showed you like a minute or so earlier. The fact is, the moment Ella's in Zavin's arms, it's like, oh, you're actually really good at this whole thing of, you know, comforting your baby. I was like, oh, well, I thought that was kind of interesting, but the fact of the matter is, they were setting this whole situation up with Zavin, especially because, like, well, because this baby's destiny is the kind of, you know, a greater destiny ahead, especially considering it's the heir to the magistrates, which the magistrates is something interesting. We never got too much into that because obviously the son did something super deplorable. We know the son was kind of a cold-blooded killer, so I assume it had something to do with that. But that's the reason why the magistrate family was running in the first place, so that was something we really never got really a big hint at, like what their whole situation was. We didn't know their personalities a little bit, but other than that, we didn't really get to know too much about them and just everything Gabor wants. That's why I kind of feel like that whole thing would have circled back around to a certain extent. Definitely just the way things ended with Zavin of basically being like, we'll meet again someday type of situation. Was like, oh, that's heavily hinting to the fact of the matter is there would have been more of that. But the fact of the matter is, fighting all four of the magistrates, I thought was pretty impressive. Like, literally by herself, Carolina was holding them all back. Especially because you'd think her being half would have probably been an issue, but it turned out not to be the case. But obviously, like, the whole Morgan talking to Nico situation, which because that's something we finally got answered a little bit, literally, I think it was like in episode 9. I was wondering what the connection between Morgan and Tina was, because Tina, like, Morgan seemed like she hated Tina. I'm like, what the hell did Tina do to you? It's like, well, she tried to do a similar thing to Tina that she did to Nico, but Tina took the staff and kind of pushed her back, especially because, like, that's why Tina kept trying to warn Nico, because it's like she was literally in her same shoes of like, oh, like, Morgan tried to befriend me and everything. It was all for the purpose of her manipulating me, regardless. But the fact of the matter is, her taking the staff out, and I was like, oh, wow. And then, like, her making everyone disappear, and I'm like, in that moment, I was like, oh, I guess they're dead. But then it turns out, like, oh, they end up in this new place known as the Thin Place. So I guess it's kind of, I was like, oh, what is it supposed to be? Is it kind of, I guess it's supposed to be almost basically purgatory, kind of a space between life and death, maybe. But then especially later on, because it kind of ties into the Cloak and Dagger stuff, which I'll get to soon enough, I guess that was kind of supposed to be kind of like how, like, you know, I thought it was almost supposed to be kind of, it's not the same, but I guess, well, it's that other place that they went, like, obviously, like, where you kind of have to pay a price for entry. Obviously their entry fee was their abilities. Like, everything dealing with the Loas and stuff like that, it's definitely in season 2, like, that was kind of like the lane. It's because they even remarked on it, like, oh yeah, this place actually looks different from when we were actually here, you know. It's like, oh, the gas station, and, you know, it looking like this, it's like, oh, that does sound super scary. It's like, well, it was more emotional scary because of what those places kind of represented for everyone. Oh yeah, also looking like a mall, these terrible, like, records, obviously what those records represented, you know. That was kind of whole, obviously, as you know, having watched Cloak and Dagger, obviously, you know, like, those records they were referencing mean a lot more than just them being like, oh, some scary records. There's, you know, a story behind that, obviously. But like I was saying, like, my surprise was the fact of the matter is, oh yeah, those people that came here, they're still alive. Like, you're kind of basically spiritually separated from both your abilities and whatever your situation is. So the Gaborums had been removed from them the moment they stepped into this, you know, thin place. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Also, I love the fact that they had to call out Quentin, because Quentin's like, oh, like, being like the Oriental and the bispectral Negro boy, and they're like, whoa, you can't talk like that. I even love it when him saying that, Nico has to look up being like, but regardless, I think it just kind of caught me by surprise him talking like that. I was like, right, I guess you've been here for a long time. You're very, like, very, very old. Because there was even this moment later on that, like, they're talking, like, they're trying to find Quentin and, like, Chase says this whole thing of, like, hey, it's your favorite diverse group of youths. And he's like, I mean, obviously, he's like, I'm not, you know, talking about myself, obviously. I love that moment. But I did like everything that each one of them was kind of dealing with, because I thought it was kind of fascinating. For one, the whole Nico situation, she gets confronted by her grandmother. See, that's the thing where I'm not 100% sure how that place works, because it's supposed to, like, feed on basically your darkest nightmares and basically make you face them. But then it seems like there's something a little more real to it. Maybe, I don't know. It's really hard to say because it's like, well, she got attacked by her grandmother and her grandmother's, I believe her grandmother's sisters, and I don't know. And then being rescued by Amy, but then later on it's like, was that actually Amy, or was that was that Amy at one point in time, but later on that was always Quentin? That's what I'm wondering about, I just think that I'm not cool. Like, the fact is he makes that reveal later on that it was him and not Amy. It makes me think, like, I mean, why? I guess he picked that form because he didn't want, Morgan to know he was helping. Like, I guess it's easier to pretend to be someone else rather than, that makes me think, like, it had to be him the entire time, because why would he pick that particular form? Like, he could pick any form. Like, why particularly Amy's just for that one instant at the end, if that was the case? I wonder the whole being a messenger for Morgan. I doubt there was any truth to that, because it seemed like he was hiding from her. So regardless, once again, I'm going on a tangent and everything. But it was almost sad because, like, Nico gets reunited with Amy. I was like, holy crap. But then it's like, oh, she's been here so long, so she doesn't remember her. And I'm like, oh man, that sucks. I was like, oh, like, especially later on too, because, like, obviously where that leads Nico, because it eventually leads her to find Tina, because, like, obviously she doesn't want to leave any of her friends or anyone behind, like, in its place, and she went to find Tina, and Tina's darkest moment is obviously, like, the nightmarish moment that they kind of have to live over and over again for her is when Amy died. And it turns out, like, Tina was so desperate to try and bring her back, but she's like, I can't remember the spell, but she's like, Nico, maybe you can do it. But Nico kind of in her own way lets Amy go, because it's like, this isn't Amy, and the fact of the matter is we can't do anything about it. Past is a past, and it kind of, it shocks Tina back to her senses to be like, right, you're 100% right, we can't go back. The fact of the matter is Amy's kind of going, like, we both kind of have to move on, because that was something that was always holding both of them back, the whole Amy situation. Obviously that, that's her daughter, that's her sister, she meant the world to them, so. And then the situation with Chase I thought was interesting. I mean, I guess it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but I did like that they kind of dealt with that. Like, Victor kind of almost confronting his own past as well, because that was obviously something he had to deal with, was like his anger issues, because it stemmed from this cycle of abuse. He was abused by his dad, so he abused Chase. And obviously you had that moment of Chase defending his dad. It's like, oh, do you like how's it feel to be on the other end? Because as someone who was abused, like, I think it felt good to fight back, but then Victor had to stop him, because it's like this cycle of abuse, we need to stop it now, because if you do this, like, you're not like me, and if you go down this path of, like, hurting him more and try to do that, the fact is it's there. Like, if you don't, like, fight it, like, you'll end up like me. I don't want you to end up like me. You're not like me. So I thought that was kind of a neat storyline element for him. Obviously Gert kind of, her and Stacy, there's some issues there, because it turns out, Stacy mind wiped her when she was like 12 or 13, because she stumbled across, like, their experiments, their earlier version of Old Lace. So hinting at the fact is there have been other Old Laces before Old Lace. What I thought was interesting, though, is it was never 100% resolved, that particular situation. It was like the others showed up to kind of pull them out of it. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, because I think more so than anything, I think for Gert, it was supposed to be a thing of learning, like, oh, that's potentially where her anxiety came from. Subconsciously, she was like, wait, like, the fact of the matter is something's wrong, but you can't quite figure it out. So, like, her anxiety and stuff like that is a byproduct of it, which Stacey was like, no, that can't be the case at all. But it's just kind of like which I think is also potentially hinting the fact is that, kind of showing, like, almost to a certain extent how the mother was able to kind of infiltrate Stacy, because it already showed that Stacy kind of crossed some very, like, gray. I mean, to be fair, they all crossed that line because of the whole, being murderers and everything. But, like, the whole thing on crossing that line, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing, because obviously the mother was kind of willing to do whatever last season. So to see that Stacy kind of did something kind of gray area when it came to the whole Gert thing, obviously it was to protect her and stuff like that, because obviously Gert's like, okay, this is like Old Lace, so obviously we're going to have a connection, but obviously this was a very experimental Old Lace that was kind of very, like, out of control. Like, the connection didn't exist between this Old Lace and Gert like it did our Old Lace and Gert, so I just thought that was kind of interesting. And like I said, it wasn't 100% something that was resolved, but I think it was just kind of the whole thing of, like, yeah, there's still stuff. I mean, that was kind of an element to it too, like, there were still elements they were learning about each other, because obviously that applies heavily in Molly's case, because she realizes like, wait, because I think in her mind too, and I think this is applied to everyone, that on some level everyone was kind of like, I thought this particular parent was a little less evil, because hell, even Chase was like, oh come on, he always thought like, hey, that, or even Gert had said it last season, she always thought that her parents were a little less evil than the rest, but it's like, oh, they're just as evil. I guess it's kind of like confirmed that a little bit, I guess, in her particular situation. But I think even Molly, because Molly was like, oh, my parents are kind of like, they died in a lab explosion and everything. They were trying to do the right thing. So it's like, oh, obviously they were good people. But then like she confronts them and is like, wait, you guys are the ones that actually picked kids off the list. And I think that shocked her, because it's like she had this image of who her parents were. And at the end of the day, it's like they were a part of Pride. So they definitely played their own part in all of this. So for her, that was kind of like a bit of a rude awakening, kind of learning like, she didn't really know much about her parents. She was like 4 at the time, so obviously like it didn't correlate in her head that like, wait, my parents were, wait, what? They were, huh? Like it didn't, because they meant the world to her, because she thought like, oh no, they were good. They were trying to do the right thing. They're trying to stop the dig site, the earthquake, and all that stuff. They were trying to save the day, but it still didn't change. The fact is, they did some evil as well. So. Granted, were they as happy and as willing, like it doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter. They were willing participants, whether or not they were like as joyful in her memory about it as her perception of it kind of was. Like I said, that was the place messing with her head and making it warped. Like, oh, they're all about. It's like, oh yeah, let's choose this one. Like they weren't too giddy about it, I'm sure, but still. That's kind of something interesting. And then the one that I thought was kind of really fascinating was Carolina's, just because for hers, it was like, I was like, oh, you're going to have to confront all the kids that were sacrificed for your dad's sake. I mean, it's like, yeah, you might not have known about it, but it's like you were the symbol of the church. You're what gave us hope. I mean, because seeing Carolina was kind of like, oh, like her kind of, inadvertently being the light. It's like you're the light that kind of drew us in, and because of you, our light was essentially snuffed out. So I thought that was I was like, oh man, having to basically, it's almost sad because you have to deal with the sins of your parents in that regard. And then it turns out hers is a little different. Like her true nightmare, it's like when Nico comes up, she's just like demonic, kind of like she's a bit of a monster and everything. And it's like, that's what Carolina's deepest fear is. And even Nico being like, you said that you'd love me, you'd accept me, you promised. And because she's carrying around a body and you're like, oh, is that supposed to be like Jonah? It's like, oh, like I should have never made you carry this burden for killing my dad, because it was like, but the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, I'm not carrying that around, I'm carrying around loneliness. And I was like, oh. And then the way that, she never brought that up to Nico immediately, I thought was kind of a fascinating thing. But the whole thing of like, oh, that was her greatest fear. Even though it's so interesting because that is a thing of like, you made such a point last season to be like, oh, maybe your darkness is, like where my light is my thing. Maybe your darkness is yours. She's the one that kind of told Nico she should accept it a little bit more. So ironically, it's ironic considering the fact that you're kind of scared of her kind of tiptoeing that lane, especially when it comes to this whole Morgan situation, because they ended up leaving without having Alex. And then we got the interesting time skip. I was like, oh, I was almost halfway. It's like, wait, we're in the future. Like, I was like, oh, the place is dustier and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, they must be I was like, oh, so we're getting some time travel. So they were going for a while. I wasn't expecting a 6-month time frame. I was actually expecting more. I thought it'd been years or something like that. I thought that's kind of what we're going to deal with, but it's like, no, it had been 6 months. I guess it was just enough time for Morgan to kind of do her thing of kind of basically being in this world and kind of taking over everything, because them opening that portal to the thin place let her slip through. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element to it. It is interesting, the whole Nico situation, because it seemed like Nico kind of pulled a bit of an Alex this season, where Alex was trying to tiptoe and like, oh, I'm so in control of this whole situation, even though he wasn't. He was just, trying to front like he was. It seemed like Nico was kind of in that similar case, because obviously for her, it's like her desperation to save Alex, because, she felt like she had failed him by not bringing him back. So it's like, no. Like all the, like the fact of the matter is, especially like we kind of went through hell through that place and we were only there for a little bit, but that means Alex has been there being tortured for the past 6 months. It's like, I failed him. I shouldn't have left without him. The fact that, but it was, especially, I guess it's because it's probably a reminder of like, we went back for Carolina. Every opportunity we've had, we've always gone back for the people that have gone missing. And now she kind of felt like, no, I feel like I'm leaving Alex behind, especially because he's a leader to a certain extent. It's like, it's like, we're not us without all of us being here, you know. So for her desperation to save him, you know, kind of, you know, the road to hell was paved with good intentions. So obviously, like, I think in her mind she thought, like, I think there was a part of her that thought like Morgan could be an ally, because it's like, hey, like, you're another witch, you understand kind of what I'm going through, you can help me get to Alex. So I think it's a combination of all of that, which is interesting, and that's something I always talk about. What I find fascinating about, you know, the Marvel TV shows and just kind of the Marvel, everything Marvel going on right now, just because like not a lot of supernatural stuff in the Marvel universe has ever been touched. Most of it has been more so on the more science fictional side of things, both TV and movie wise. There's hints, obviously, like Iron Fist leans more into supernatural mystical side of things. Doctor Strange obviously leans into more mystical side of things. I think you could borderline the whole, definitely the Ghost Rider situation definitely falls in that category. And also this, because I mean, Nico is literally the only, like, because after they definitely went like the more magic heavy side of things in the second half of the season, but it definitely makes sense because Nico has always been because that's why I was never really sure what to make of Nico's staff. I didn't know whether to think of that as technology, but it turns like, oh no, like that was straight up magic since the beginning. That wasn't like I thought it was like some magical technology or something like that, but it's like, no, it's always been straight up magic, and it just gets more magical as the season progresses, especially like I said in the second half of this season. But like I said, I did like the fact is that 6 month time skip played in some very interesting storylines. Well, for one, Leslie kind of revamping the church and stuff like that. I guess taking it into the direction Frank kind of wanted to take it without it, you know, being corrupt, because obviously he had his very selfish reasons for what. I'm surprised we never got any hint of that. I guess that was just like, well, that storyline's done. There's nothing to really do with that anymore. I wondered, was that, I don't think, they might have hinted to it, they might have said so, but I don't remember if there was any collaboration between Leslie and her mom during this, because her mom pops up only like one time, but that was just for the like, oh, I can't help you out, because if you and the baby come here, it's going to put the rest of the parishioners in danger. So, but it was a whole thing of just kind of like have faith. And so in the grand scheme of things, for it to kind of circle back around, like especially what Gaborum kind of represented and what it was connected to. But I guess for her, this was her opportunity to kind of take it back and pass those teachings on and kind of help people, you know. I love the whole Vaughn thing of him trying to be hip and stuff like that, trying to stay with like Gen Z and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, Vaughn. It's like, oh, Vaughn, every time you pop up, it hurts, dude. I love you, dude. I love you so much. I love you because you try. You put yourself out there, man, and I gotta love you for it, you know. So, but also, like I said, it led to the whole Jeffrey and Tamar thing. Where I was like, man, that's actually super surprised considering the fact that she hated Jeff so much. But to be fair, it was never Jeff that pulled the trigger. That wasn't his choice. To be fair, it was always Catherine that kind of did all that. So she kind of got her revenge. So I guess she was a little more receptive to Jeffrey being around and stuff like that. But like I said, that probably could have turned into something definitely more going forward, but you know, we'll kind of leave that as. Then there's the whole situation with Dale kind of being like, oh, I'm gonna survive on my own and stuff like that. I don't need technology and stuff like that. And I love them talk. I think it was like when they run into him later on, like, you talk about on your own, you're literally like 5 feet away from the Gaborum church and stuff like that, and you're acting like you're roughing it or something like that. I just thought that was kind of a neat element. It was also interesting too because he ended up dropping some info I thought was kind of fascinating. Was the fact is that he's the one that kind of dropped the nut, because like, oh, so Molly still never found out. It's like, right, they knew about the whole Leslie being the reason why Molly's parents died, that she kind of dealt with that, but no one else knew about that. I was like, right. I was like, I completely forgotten about that. I was like, right. I don't think any of the kids ever found out. I don't know if that's something Molly ever shared with anyone else, like her discovering that, especially because she ends up confronting Leslie about it later on. And Leslie's like, if you want to, you can kill me, but the fact of the matter is, you do this, that's going to be something you'll be carrying for the rest of your life. Like every life she's ever taken is a heavy burden to carry. So I don't wish that burden on anyone else. So, but Molly kind of being the more like, you know, obviously she was driven by revenge, but I think it also scared her because she is the one with the superhuman strength and everything, that if she wasn't careful, she could use that for evil. And obviously amongst any one of them, she was the one that always wanted to be the superhero the most, you know. So that's kind of like the direction her character, because she's always been the one that's been willing to be like, oh no, let's do some good with her powers and stuff like that, you know. And it also shows like the fact of the matter is, kind of shows her growth over as a character over other characters, because the fact of the matter is she was able to kind of let her revenge go. Which can you make the same argument about Alex? Is like, no, he was so driven by revenge. Once again, whether that's him or the son, I think it was more so him than anything. But regardless, especially because the whole Darius situation is what really pushed him over the edge. But I think Molly was able to be like, yeah, like the fact of the matter is just because I don't kill you doesn't mean I don't hate you. So. But one of my favorites was like the fact is now that they're back after everything's kind of shifted, like Stacy and I love the whole Stacy and Victor situation and them going basically to an alien meeting to talk about like everything that's happened to them, and everyone kept making references to what happened to them alien wise and stuff. I was wondering, I was like, is this going to happen? Because obviously like they haven't really referenced the MCU at large. They haven't even referenced like the event and stuff like that. So part of me was wondering like, I mean, to be fair, this is in California, but still I was wondering if it was going to tie in and something, but it's like, no, their alien situation or something different. And I love that every opportunity is like, plus afterwards I was anally probed, and it's like Victor literally runs down literally everything that happened to him. And it's like, oh, you said in a surgery with their DNA, right? So you were anally probed. And he's like, I was never anally probed. And he super got upset about it. Like, don't go around spreading that I got anally probed by some alien. No, it didn't go down like that. But I love the entire group was against him, because it's like, oh, you're making a mockery of us. He's the only one that's really dealt with some alien stuff. And that's very but I guess in the grand scheme of things, you would think that he's mocking you in some shape or form. And it's like, oh, who here thinks that this guy is being, mocking us and being insincere? And then like everyone's raising their hand, and even Stacy does, because I guess she doesn't want to seem like she's lumped with him. And I love Victor looking at, really? I love that bit. That was so cool. That's actually interesting too, that him and Stacy actually did seem like they kind of bond. I was like, is that about to turn into something? But it's like, no, Janet's still around. She's no longer just a part of like the algorithm. She kind of like became an AI system, which is interesting, because I was like, oh, so you're setting her up to kind of almost be like a Jarvis or a Friday or a Karen. I feel like Friday never comes up enough in the MCU. That being Tony's new AI, and Karen's only been like a Homecoming thing. I hope that circles back around in some shape or form when it comes back, because she wasn't in Far From Home at all, dude. I was kind of bummed about that. I was hoping we get some more Karen, because I love it. Because also it's Jennifer Connelly, so that's pretty cool, But regardless, like I said, I thought that was kind of a neat element. They also keep her alive, while also, being more, her being like, oh, this is like kind of the happiest I've kind of been, which, if you look at that, that's kind of a little bit of a dark situation, be like, oh, that's the happiest you've been, is being an AI system, basically. But regardless, I did love the fact is, it's like, oh, Stacy and Dale are reunited, and it was kind of like oh man, yeah, I'm so sorry about the whole trying to kill you thing. Also, it's like, oh, the aliens did kind of use me. Well, it's like, oh, so why are you and Victor together? It's like, oh, we're just friends. I mean, the aliens did use us to have physicality with each other. And Victor's he's lifting his head like, oh, why'd you even say that? And Dale's like, wait, what? That's not the easiest thing to kind of hear. It's like, oh. It doesn't seem like they necessarily 100% dealt with that, but it's just like, I love that being a bit of a bit. I didn't talk about it either, but there was a whole Robert situation I thought was kind of interesting. That's so fascinating when you see Robert. He's super happy and stuff like that. You have the entire series, you have never seen him like that. It was weird, like him being all happy and stuff like that. I mean, I guess it's because the spell was almost overcompensating, like making him super duper happy, because obviously everything about Morgan's supposed to make him happy and stuff like that. But I was like, it seems so weird to see him happy, because he's always kind of a little doom and gloomish a little bit. I mean, to be fair, that was kind of like, I don't know, like his situation is just, and it's sad in the grand scheme of things, because obviously he's being manipulated by Morgan, which is pushing him closer to Nico, but also pushing him further away from Tina and stuff like that, so especially like I thought it was kind of a neat element too, where it's kind of like, oh, Morgan's kind of got like a coven of witches. I wasn't expecting that. I kind of expected her to kind of be 100% by herself. I wondered, in that 6 month time frame, did she bring witches from the other side, or were they already here? Because I'm curious like how far back Morgan's situation goes. Hell, they even reference it later on, because I think when they ran into Ty, they're like, Morgan Le Fay, like from King Arthur. And it's like, yeah, no. And I think even Nico had never realized, like, no, it doesn't matter, because I think even she had never correlated, like, oh, that is a thing, huh? Isn't it? And so, regardless. You know, the whole Morgan thing is even sadder when you actually think about the fact is that she was manipulated, how she manipulated. And he goes, oh my God, look at Alex. Oh, bring me the staff and everything, and I can help you get to him. Oh, look at him, he's being tortured and stuff like that. I'm like, that's super morbid and messed up to see him put in that situation. Because, you know, obviously, because once again, like, every time Nico would see him, it'd be a reminder of like, oh, I failed him, I left him behind, I need to get back to that other world. You know, her dad making the sacrifice that he did in the long run, like her, like obviously him and Tina being reunited. So I was like, oh, it's actually kind of, you know, sweet. I love that they do. I think they do a really good job of humanizing the parents, like despite all the terrible stuff they did. And once again, it's like they'll justify, but I'm like, oh, we did all this to protect you and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, I think they do a good job humanizing them to be like, yeah, they definitely have their issues, and obviously they went about things the wrong way. But the fact of the matter is, their love for their children should never be questioned, type of thing, you know. So. But Nico getting welcomed into like that coven and everything, which we saw the freaking Darkhold. I lost my damn mind. I had to rewind. I was like, was that the freaking Darkhold? You have no idea how much I lost my mind on that moment. Because like a lot of like, there's very few crossover amongst obviously in Marvel TV shows. Like the only ones that have ever done that really is obviously the Netflix shows, not just in the whole Defenders thing, but other characters and stuff like that have passed around all the different shows and stuff like that. But I was actually super surprised with the whole situation of seeing the Darkhold again. Obviously, if you haven't watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Darkhold pops up in season 4. So, and the last time we see it, spoilers for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but this was a couple years ago. The last time we saw it, Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, was leaving with it, going to another dimension. So I'm like, how the hell did Morgan get her hands on it? Well, I guess that, which in my mind, that in that moment, in that instance right there, that and Cloak and Dagger popping up literally connects everything, in my opinion. The reason why, because obviously Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ties into the MCU as a large. I know that's a whole complicated thing, especially with the direction the show's going now. But also Cloak and Dagger reference stuff from the Netflix shows. Like they reference Ben Urich, they reference Luke Cage, they reference Misty Knight. So it's like there's a definite heavy connection in that regard. So it's like it connects Runaways to that continuity as well. So. And it's something I've brought up before, and once again, this was something I heard years ago on SourceFed Nerd. Once again, it's something I've always kind of treated as gospel. I don't know if it's 100% true, but word is, like, if you look at Doctor Strange in the library that Wong is looking after, the fact of the matter is there's a missing book. Apparently, and that's, like I said, around the time it popped up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., my understanding, and at least what some people were saying, is it's supposed to suggest that missing book is the Darkhold, which once again kind of ties the MCU to the MCU at large. Obviously, once again, that relationship has always been a one-sided thing. Obviously, going forward, that'd be a different sided thing. But obviously, the movies and TV shows not connecting. Obviously, that's why Marvel TV is shifting in the direction that it is. Once again, that's a bit of a tangent in itself. So I just lost my mind. I was like, the freaking Darkhold. I wasn't expecting it. I like that. So that must mean at some point in time she had to have gotten that from Robbie. Not unless he left it there. Like after he did what he did, he's like, well, this is Dimension. No one's going to get here. Which is interesting considering the fact that you have two sets of hero, Cloak and Dagger, as well as the Runaways who can potentially get to this world. So it's just interesting. Maybe he never expected anyone to be able to get there. But regardless. I was curious though whether or not that darkness inside of Nico was actually her own situation, or whether that was Morgan, because it seemed like that came out more so every time Morgan pushed her. So it's almost like Morgan's dark influence on Nico is what led to like her skin kind of cracking and like her kind of tapping into that deeper power. It was kind of interesting too, because I love Nico at one point in time. It's like, wait, I can do spells with just more than just one word. It's like, yeah, you know, the whole one word, because I thought she was limited to that. It's like, no, she can do more. It's just she's a novice at it. This is also her first instance of ever seeing. I guess Tina never felt like she needed to kind of tap into her magic. She never did anything with it. Like obviously she had the staff and everything, but I guess it's like other than that, she never felt the need to it. I mean, to be fair, her and Robert kicked Nico's ass without it last episode. I mean, to be fair, there was like no magic going down in that fight last season, except when, you know, that darkness in Nico kind of kicked up. But still, I just thought that was kind of an interesting element. I'm like, oh wow, they're really definitely seeing Tina definitely push the little more magical boundaries this season. And obviously, because I keep referencing it, I was so excited to see Cloak and Dagger. I do like that they were just stinger at the end of an episode. I thought that was kind of pretty neat. So technically, Ty and Tandy were in 2 episodes, but really it was 1 full episode. But I was just like, dude, I love that. And I love that it's just like they kind of ran into each other at the worst time. It's like, Tandy and Nico kind of squaring off, but Ty being like, whoa, 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 calm down, guys. I do like that the fact of the matter is, obviously you kind of figured, this is taking place after, season two's finale. Spoilers for for Marvel's Cloak and Dagger, but obviously like Ty and Tandy leave New Orleans at the end. So I guess they were just kind of out adventuring. And for them, it's like, well, we said we're going to try and do some good with our powers to help people. It's like, oh, well, they need our help, so let's help them and everything. I also love because it's like and I might have mentioned this before, but I thought it was kind of, and like when I was talking about the trailer, I think it is a neat thing putting these particular groups together. I don't know if they've ever had any crossover in the comic books, whatsoever, but I think it's neat because like they're in a position of they can only understand each other. It's like, oh, we're kids with superpowers. They've never had anyone else to really talk to about that. And I think that's such an element that never really gets brought up too much in any shows, whether it be like Marvel or DC. Like that's an element of like the closest you get to that, and like definitely in the MCU at large, is Peter Parker. That's because he's the youngest of the superheroes. I mean, depending on what they end up doing, the whole Cassie situation, that could obviously change, but like for them to kind of find each other. I even love like her being like, must have been like an oil rig thing, and even Nico's like, what? And then Tandy being like, it's like this and that, obviously referencing what happened to him. She's like, it's not complicated. And then she kind of looks at Nico and Ty and is like, okay, it is a little bit complicated. It's just that nerdy thing of like, oh my god, these two worlds colliding, because obviously I like Runaways and I like Marvel's Cloak and Dagger, so they haven't seen them both, and I'm like, this is happening. Obviously, it makes you a little sad too, because obviously, even if it wasn't just this being the final season, we already know that like Cloak and Dagger was canceled, and just with everything going down, it will probably never come back, which just breaks my heart even more. To like really, really like the show because there was so much story left to tell. Granted, once again, I always say this, it ended in a way where it's like, oh, everything's kind of closed and shut, but everything was left open-ended enough to be like, oh, this could be, they could definitely be more to their story. There definitely is more to their story. So, it's neat that this is kind of part of that story, part of another chapter in their story. I just thought it was kind of neat to kind of tie that in like that. Tie. But I do love that, like, them showing up, helping the kids and everything. It's like, I love Chase. It's like, yeah, who's worthless or something like that. And he's like, hey, who's the new kids? Ty and Tandy helping out and stuff like that. I thought it was, pretty dope. Especially when Ty teleported, was it Stacy, Victor, and Dale away and put them in front of the Hollywood sign and stuff like that. It's like, I like our new friends our kids are hanging out with. That's cool. Which reminds me of the reveal where it's like, oh, so what are your powers? It's like, well, I don't actually have any powers. I have these like high tech like gauntlets I call the Fiscons. Actually, I don't have them right now. It's like, and it's like, yeah, I'm telepathically linked to a dinosaur that isn't here right now. And I'll tend to be like, all right, cool. I love that response. It was so good. Obviously, this taking place after season 2. I was almost halfway expecting Tandy to kind of do the whole. I wonder whether that had been something we would have seen more from her going forward. The whole like, because obviously she created a longsword in season 2. Obviously, rather than just using the dagger, she never made it in this season, but she did do the whole like light ball attack that she learned last season. Like she did that, but I was almost like, I wonder if she ever going to do the sword thing again. But I was like, maybe that was just that specific fight last season. But I kind of felt like that was going to be something she'd use a lot more going forward. But maybe the circumstances just never brought it up. But still, it's kind of neat to see them all kind of fighting together and everything. And obviously because it's like, oh, Nico wanted to go to the thin place, so they're all there. It's like, well, I wish you kind of talked to us about it. I did like that moment of everyone like, all right, let's link hands before we go through, and they go through the door, and it's like, oh, we're just here. There's actually a cute moment if you actually look at it. Ty and Tandy are still holding hands, and then they kind of look down and realize they're still holding hands, and then they kind of pull their hands away. I was like, that's actually super cute and adorable. It's like, oh, because it's also interesting because like Ty and Tandy have been through a lot, so it's interesting like they kind of dealt with their baggage. Obviously, they mainly dealt with it in season 1. They definitely dealt with it in season 2. To kind of wrap things up. So they're in a really good place, and to meet up with the Runaways, who are definitely going through some issues right now. Their baggage just constantly keeps developing. I just thought it's just got kind of a neat parallel of like, oh, these are two people who've kind of figured their situation out, meeting up with a group of people who haven't figured theirs out. So I thought that was kind of a neat element, especially when everyone kind of gets talking and stuff like that, Because I even thought it was kind of neat because like while they're in a thin place, because obviously it shows you like, what you're dealing with. Obviously like she ends up like Tandy ends up seeing one of her slippers, and obviously she touches it, and kind of like, I guess that's kind of like a little wink and nod to anyone that's maybe never seen Cloak and Dagger, so giving you a little wink and nod towards like the show and just everything that she's been through. It's actually kind of interesting because I did like the fact of the matter is the group kind of like Ty and Tandy kind of like, obviously like Tandy's kicking it with Nico and Carolina, and it's actually interesting because it's like, it brought to my attention something because I'm an idiot. I never would have correlated until she brought it up. Nico and Carolina's situation, light and dark. I don't know why that didn't. I'm nuts for the whole light and dark element, and it didn't necessarily correlate because obviously Morgan was supposed to be kind of like the devil on her shoulder, whereas Carolina was supposed to be the angel on her shoulder. But the fact of the matter is, the connect the same way like Ty and Tandy work. It didn't correlate in my head. Of course, obviously I've seen Cloak and Dagger at this point in time, so it's like I don't know why that never correlated. Like the connection of like, oh, like Carolina and Nico's thing being very similar to Ty and Tandy's. Like it should have been obvious. There's a little more like balance to Ty and Tandy because they are yin and yang to the most extreme. Their situation is a little bit different, but obviously Carolina and Nico can kind of be in that flow as well. It is kind of messed up that Tandy ended up looking into her hopes like that, but it's because like obviously the way Nico was acting is like I don't know if I can necessarily trust you, but obviously like that was obviously an issue that she dealt with. I mean hell, it could have been worse, Nico. At least she's not stilling hopes like she was at one point in time. Like obviously that's kind of a part of herself I'm sure she heavily regrets, but obviously I just thought that was kind of interesting in the grand scheme of things. And it's just like, oh, like that kind of made her go like, no, I see what's in her hopes and stuff like that. It's like, she thought like, because I think, she probably found some kinship because she realizes Nico's kind of going through some stuff right now, but seeing what's deep inside of her. Because let's not forget, like, that was a hope, she had saw in Home Dude from season 1 of Cloak and Dagger. Tandy had seen that. So I think maybe it kind of made her think about her own life and like that Nico has these dreams and aspirations, and the fact of the matter is like I think for her she is like, oh no, I see that you're not who I thought you were. So I thought it was a neat element. And then there's the whole like Ty and Chase bonding and stuff like that, and I love that. I think it was like Gert being like this boy's bonding or something like this is my my nightmare or something like that, because it's like, oh, lacrosse, oh, basketball, and I'm like back and forth, and I love that Chase makes another reference at his coach. It's like, oh, my coach said this, and I love that Ty's like, wasn't it actually so and so that said that? He's like, and Chase being like, did Coach say anything original? I love that being a bit. But what I also like is because obviously, like, the place is playing on Gert's fear of like, oh, we left Molly behind, and the fact of the matter is, it's also sucking. That was never circled back to, but she trusted that dude, and it's like, oh man, like the fact of the matter is, like, I thought was, showing him my strength and everything, he wasn't freaked out and everything, but in the grand scheme of things, either, he was being manipulated by the witches, or it didn't seem like it was part of it. It does seem like it's kind of like, because also there's that whole Max thing I didn't even talk about. Poor bastard got his mind and memory like messed with and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting because Gert, I guess because he never came back around, and to be fair, they were too busy trying to save the world, but like that was something that never, it's kind of sad, like, oh, you'll basically be spending the rest of your life trying to remember and figure out who you are. I guess they completely wiped his memory, which is like, man, that's such a shitty thing to do. But regardless, it was interesting that they hinted at that basically that's why the phones weren't working on him, because it's like, well, we can't have like the people handing out our phones and stuff like that going crazy, getting into fights and stuff like that, being over obsessed with the phone as anyone else. So I didn't talk about that, but that was kind of a neat element, especially because it's like each one has like a feather on the inside, and it's like the moment you remove the feather, like the phone turns to dust and stuff like that. But even then, Gert was so, enchanted by the phone and stuff like that. She was like, oh my God, look what you did. You broke my phone. And I was like, oh, what happened? It's like, and Nico's like, yeah, apparently he destroyed her phone. And then Chase is like, why do you automatically choose her side? And Nico's like, feminism? But regardless, circling back to what I was talking about before, Gert's fear of like the whole Molly situation I thought was kind of interesting, obviously because, Gert kind of, she thinks a lot, she gets inside of her head, she starts panicking, and the fact is, as she's trying to get Ty to like, take me back and you can come back, but she's like, if I leave, I might not be able to bring the others back. But the fact is, he touches her head and she sees, like, obviously, the fear situation. I think if you're cognizant of it, you'd be like, whoa, what the hell did you just do? Like, you can recognize that, something was done. So But you see, in the grand scheme of things, her fear is the fact is losing Chase, Molly, and Olays. And so I love that being an element later on. He was like, you want to pretend like Chase doesn't matter to you, but obviously he does, because that's one of your greatest fear. He, it's not just Molly and Olays that are part of your family. So is, Chase as well, lacrosse boy, I even love that. It's like, all right, so, do your whole like magic, the whole swoosh, with your magic hoodie thing. And he's like, bro, literally everything you said in that sentence was wrong. And I love that they kept being like, yo, the magic hoodie. It's like, no, it's not a magic hoodie. It just helps me. Whatever. We're not about to get into this. He didn't say that, but I took it as much, so. The thing I thought was kind of fascinating about that place was because it did seem like, because everything kind of hints to the fact is that that's where Nico sent AWOL and his team. But the thing is, other things there didn't seem like they were real. They were more so manifestations of nightmares and stuff like that. So it's like, was AWOL them technically that for Nico because she did something too? She sent them somewhere. Was it even that she sent them to that place, or was it just, I think it was probably more so a manifestation in that place, obviously using your nightmares against you, because that was a nightmare of like, the fact that she couldn't control her darkness, even though she kept trying to say, oh, I can have control over it, which obviously that led to issues with Carolina, because Carolina was like, you can't control this, like I'm worried about it. You're kind of giving into this darkness and stuff like that. You kind of try to steer her towards essentially to the light, because it's like you're kind of losing who you were and stuff like that. But then, because obviously Nico took it the wrong way, which obviously you couldn't help but take it the wrong way. It's like, oh, it's not, you're not scared for me, you're scared of me. So obviously that ends up leading to Nico kind of pushing people away. And I think that just comes from the thing of kind of like, to be stronger for people, you feel like you kind of have to push them away, because it's kind of like, I know what I'm doing here, even though I kind of don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants type of situation, but regardless, like I said, I'm going on a tangent and stuff, but having Alex, being, beat up and tortured, his mom being there trying to console him, is like, good. The fact that you kill someone, you will never come back from it. But then have Darius there, I was like, oh, is that supposed to represent that this is where they went after they died or something like that? But once again, it's like the devil's on, in this particular case, it's not even the angel and the devil, it's straight up the devil's on your shoulder, kind of tugging, pulling your soul in different directions. But I thought it was actually pretty badass when because obviously they're like obviously on two separate towers, and for Nico to cast a spell to literally have them gliding across a cloud of darkness to the other tower. I was like, actually, that's super fucking dope looking. But everyone being reunited and trying to fight back, especially, poor Quentin, gets killed in the grand scheme of things. So, but it was actually interesting. And I even love how later on Tandy kind of references it, like your peanut butter with my chocolate type of situation of like, Nico, like, because normally, like, because Tandy is like, I'm the only one who can access my daggers. So Tandy threw one. Nico grabbed it and corrupted it with her darkness, like solidifying it and then stabbing Quentin. I was like, oh, that's actually super freaking dope. I was like, that's actually something you could be like, once again, it's like, oh, if they ever had the opportunity, that's something they could probably play around with a little bit more, is that whole, situation. But still, it took Alex crossing that line, because it's like, okay, so which family are you going to choose? Your friends or your old family? And he ends up killing his mom. And it's like, good. And like this, kind of giving in, once again, hinting to the fact there's a lot of who Alex is stems from his parents. Like, you might try to say you're not like your parents, but, Darius being like, the fact of the matter is you're still just like them. It's bubbling there underneath. And obviously when it was all said and done, though, him killing them, like, kind of freed him of that darkness and stuff like that. It's like, oh, hey, you guys, you came for me. It's like, wait, am I supposed to remember who these two are? It's like, nah, they're new. We're here to save you. And it's like, oh, cool. Let's get the hell out of here, man. And the moment, like, Tandy touches him, that moment, I was like, obviously I had my feelings. I was like, there's only like a couple episodes left, and like this, we got to the second half of the season. I'm like, this is episode 6, and we're finally getting into the Morgan stuff heavily. I'm like, yeah, this is going to walk away not 100% sad, fulfilled. That definitely came up the moment we saw Alex. I was like, oh, that's definitely not going to get answered this season. Him basically having control of everyone's tech and abilities. I was like, and then like at that moment, because obviously like when you see it, when Tandy sees it, Alex sees it too, and she was like, wait, what? And Alex is like, and then they get back, it's like, no, we got to send him back. I was like, what? No, we just literally, it's like, no, I saw what was in his hope. Like, they're not good. Which even Ty was like, he trusts Tandy's in it. It's like, if Tandy says we should listen to her, we should listen to her. But it's like, for Alex, it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. The fact of the matter is my mind's not right. The fact is, you're being tortured all that long. But I was like, in the grand scheme of things, it's one of those things. It kind of makes me think of Umbrella Academy. Spoilers for Umbrella Academy. The one sibling who doesn't have powers just happened to end up being the greatest one of all, which Alex never had any superpowers. Obviously, his mind has always been his superpower, but for it to end up being a thing of like, oh, him potentially getting everyone's abilities, becoming the almost basically like becoming super scroll when you actually kind of think about it, which is interesting. It's like literally having access to everyone's powers, which begs the question, what did you do to get those powers? Did you literally kill everyone to get those powers? Potentially seeing that being his future, which obviously we've delved into the future stuff with the whole Chase situation, but regardless, having that be a thing though. But Ty and Tandy, leaving and being like, hey, maybe you'll be there for us when we need you. I'm like, they won't be, because it's the end for everyone. But I was like, it was nice to know that, because obviously that was filmed before, like way before Cloak and Dagger was canceled. So I was like, ugh. But it's so heartbreaking, because I was like, dude, I would love to see this collaboration happen again. Hell, they even finally met Lacey. It's like, holy crap, that's really a dinosaur. And Ty's touching, it's like, this is actually pretty cool. I thought that was pretty dope. And once again, obviously, like, it was kind of a crossover character-wise and storyline-wise, so it's not like what went down in that episode didn't matter. It actually, tied over. Once again, haha, funny, Tyrone. The fact is, it actually played a role in Gert's story, because Gert was like, yeah, like, actually the whole situation with Ty made me realize I can't live my life in fear. And I love her having that open moment with Chase and everything. She's like, trying to talk to him, but he's staring at a tablet. She's like, are you watching porn? You better not be watching porn. And he's like, oh no, like, look at this. It's the whole college thing. She's like, wait, you want me to go to Smith? It's like, yeah. And it's like, well, maybe I'll find an engineering school, because nearby, because obviously I can't play lacrosse forever. And it's like, he's like, I'm so sorry, I was my mind was so focused on this. What were you saying? And then she kisses him, because it's like, thank you, because it's like, I don't know, it was nice, because I didn't even talk about it, but earlier in the season he did tell her I love you, but she never gave him a response, because like old Lace can kind of tell, because Gert was talking to her, and it's like she can kind of tell. It's like, no, I can't tell him like that's actually how I feel and stuff like that, because she had lived her entire life being so worried, because like the moment Chase left, it made her go like, I get that. I was actually kind of similar as a teenager. I used to be one of those kids that wrote poetry, and I had a girlfriend at the time who talked about the fact is I always wrote about like, oh, someone leaving me and stuff like that, which is weird, because I think maybe on some psychological level I might have some twisted, I just have this thing where I just kind of assume and feel like everyone's gonna leave me. So when Gert kind of opened up about that, I'm like, yo, I kind of feel that for real, because especially at her age, I was like, age that Gert's supposed to be, I'm like, I kind of felt that exact same way. Like, my fear was always like, oh, people are going to end up leaving me, and it's like, oh, you left me. It fed into, oh, and like it's like I knew the entire time. So I kind of felt that moment. But for her, it's like I can't live in fear of like stuff like that, because I know how I feel about you and how you feel about me. So I just thought that was kind of a neat moment. But it's even more sad when you actually think about what that was setting up, especially where things end up, where it's like, oh, Gert, jumping all around, Gert ends up dying. So it's like, they were setting that up on purpose in the grand scheme of things. And once again, you can definitely tell that Alex wasn't 100% himself afterwards, because he was looking at his mom, because it was a reminder of like, oh yeah, I killed my mom in that other dimension. And the fact of the matter is my mom's also dead, because I put her in that position where she could get killed. Once again, he never finds out about the whole Tamar situation. Tamar, I think it's kind of the same thing, but it's pronounced Tamar. But regardless, I also didn't even talk about it, but the parents working together to rescue Molly was pretty bad. I even love that Molly talks about it. It's like, no, look at this, it's pretty dope, because obviously there is that super messed up thing. It's a cool thing, but it's actually a sad thing, because when you get struck by lightning, you get a specific scar, which is like, yo, that actually looks pretty badass. But for Molly, it's like, no, it's a representation of the fact is I'm strong. That's why they took me. It's not because I'm the weakest. I am the strongest. So the fact of the matter is, once again, embracing her hero side of things, I think it's actually pretty dope. And it was also neat to kind of have all the parents come together to save Molly. And then like have the kids and the parents, like despite everything and despite our differences, we've got this big common enemy that we need to stop. It's like kind of put like our issues kind of aside and work together. Chase working together with his mom and dad, learning a little bit about them. It's like the new dynamic they're kind of going through and everything, Stacy and Dale, because Dale's working on some stuff, and it's like, yeah, I know I seem like a bit of an idiot, but I think you guys kind of forget that like I'm a really smart person. I'm really good at bioengineering. And then Gert was like, no, I was about to say this is actually pretty badass, Dale. He's like, really? And I'm like, family bonding, even though it's the complicated situation that you guys have with each other, but still. But then there's Alex's situation. Like, Alex is the one that was the most resistant of Jeffrey, because it's just, he wasn't quite the same after being gone and everything like that. It's like, well, I was expecting you at your mom's funeral. He was like, well, to be fair, at the time I was possessed by an alien, and then I was being tortured in another dimension. So, but the fact of the matter is, like, I think Jeff could definitely tell that there's something was different and was off about Alex. It's like, oh, you're kind of like hard now, aren't you? Or something like that. And he's like, no, like, for him, it's kind of like, I'm doing whatever it takes to survive, which I'm thinking like, oh, that's definitely, like, Alex is definitely struggling. He's still on that tipping point, but like the scales definitely do lean more in a certain direction than they used to, you know? So, especially later on when he ended up stabbing one of those witches and actually killing them, because it was kind of like, that was the first time he'd ever really killed someone. I mean, granted, like, everyone in their own right kind of had, well, the only ones that technically, and I think that kind of is very befitting of the characters. It's like, at this point, the only ones that have ever had actual blood on their hands is Nico, because she ended up killing Jonah. Granted, he came back, but still, she didn't know that at the time she killed him. But also, this was Alex's first time getting blood on his hand, kind of showing like, oh, like, they were the characters that kind of dealt with that, like, balance the most of, like, you know, tipping things in that particular lane of, like, still figuring themselves out of, like, you know, who am I, like, after all of this, you know, because, you know, killing someone changes you forever. That was kind of the whole point. But like I said, it was a pretty neat, like, frontal, like, way of, like, all of them working together. Like I said, the adults and the kids to take down Morgan. But even despite all that, she ended up kind of still having the upper hand. And if it wasn't for Gert was literally the key factor in all this that won them this battle, you know? Because none of them were able to, you know, I did like it. I thought it was pretty badass when, like, both, she's trying to possess Nico, but then Carolina steps on, especially because, like, that darkness kind of wrapping around and squeezing the energy, like almost like this force field bubble that Carolina had created, it being squished by the darkness. I don't know, that just looked so badass, especially because it's, you know, Carolina's, you know, fighting for the person she cares about most, and, you know, it's trying to protect Nico from her. You know, I thought that was kind of a, you know, neat element. Like I said, all of them working together. But if it wasn't for Gert's sacrifice, like, she laid down this trapped her, and Tina was able to seal her away. Which, I didn't talk about it, like, but when they first introduced, like, the magic and stuff like that, and it started off a little orange, I'm like, is that some Doctor Strange? It ended up being different, but part of me was wondering, like, oh, that seemed like there were hints of Doctor Strange magic. It might just be, like, all magic in this universe, the Marvel universe, kind of, like, works in a similar regard in that case, so maybe, like, there's similarities, but obviously they kind of did their own thing with it. But regardless, that was actually sad to see that situation, because obviously I was like, oh, we want to get to that Amy spell, because, like, obviously Tina was trying to bring back Amy, so I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be that point. Obviously they ended up, because, like, the thing is, Morgan isn't dead, they just sent her back to the other side, so that was an element that's never going to be 100% dealt with. She's still back over there, but she isn't dead. So but I thought it was something kind of but it's like, oh, Gert's dead, and then, like, we jump around timeline wise. I was like wondering how they were going to handle that, but it's like, oh, Chase is coming back in time to save Gert, and then we, like, it's not even like 2019. Well, it's not even present time that he's come back to, because I forgot they did a whole 6-month time year skip, so it might actually be 2019 at this point in time. Because he did say, like, it was like 3 years later, because it was like 2022. So the fact of the matter is, seeing, and I mean, to be fair, it's like, if there's not all of them there, the group suffered its issues. They all kind of went their separate ways. They kind of kept in contact to a certain extent, but they kind of went their own separate ways, especially because we see that things didn't work out with Nico and Carolina. Like, you know, Nico apparently had left. Carolina's was someone else named Julie. Obviously Molly, you know, because all of them made a promise to kind of not let this stop them, that to live their lives and kind of, you know, go on. But obviously that's a whole complicated thing, because now Chase is here, but he's also, because then we have, like, Alex showing up and he's trying to kill Nico. I was like, oh man, that sucks. I was like, I guess we're going down that route. But it's like, oh, Nico stopped the bullet. He's like, how? You don't have the staff? And she's like, yeah, I've learned a trick or two. But it turns out this is Alex, who's from the furthest future, like, Chases. They're from, like, 2028, if I remember correctly. I think that's the year that they came from. But not only that whole situation, but it's like, oh, apparently gathering everyone up and be like, yeah, apparently he's here because apparently someone tried to kill him, which I'm like, oh, which meant there was definitely some dissent in the group, which I'm assuming, in the grand scheme of things, it's like they must have found out about Alex's situation, so they were trying to stop him in the grand scheme of things. Like, who would? And it was so interesting because they lay a lot of groundwork in the final episode, being like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is some of us end up becoming our parents. It's like, well, which ones? It's like, I can't tell you. You know, space-time continuum mess things up. Things might go in a completely different direction. I want things to go in a specific direction, and we change things, you know. So it turns into that whole thing, and especially because Alex has to be there to be like, wait, that's what I turn into. He's like, oh, come on, man, that, you know, that sucks. And I love that Alex isn't, you know, it is kind of an interesting thing to see that this Alex is kind of the Alex. This isn't even the Alex that came back from, you know, the dark dimension. This is the Alex that he kind of has elements of who he was before, like kind of all the craziness. I guess going back to a bit of a normal life, kind of turn him back a little bit into himself. Obviously, he's working at his dad's company and stuff like that. He's one of, like, him, Stacy, and Dale are the only parents you really hear about. Like in 2022, because apparently, like, they're off, like, Dale and Stacy are off on some vacation or something like that. Obviously, Chase spends so much time locked away because he's working on a means to, you know, he's too busy trying to invent time travel and stuff like that. I even love it. I love that even Alex being like, wait, seriously? It ends up being Chase that ends up being a doctor, being a Time Lord. And I love that Nico catches the references because they never get his references. Like, yeah, I know that's a Doctor Who thing, but it's like, oh, you actually nailed that. That's so interesting because they totally never get his references. Because I think he made... I think he ended, yeah, because with Cloak and Dagger were there, he ended up making a, like, Magic, wasn't Magic the Gathering reference, and it's like, oh yeah, you guys, it's a Magic the Gathering thing, and I guess you guys don't play it either, you don't understand my reference, so. Because it was really interesting the way it was structured. Part of me was wondering, like, okay, so is this going to be their, like, what? Because I always wonder with stuff like this. Like, I doubt it, because obviously, because I'm sure the entire season was already done by the time it got canceled. So there was no, like, oh, last minute, let's change the ending or something like that. But that's what I was wondering. I was like, is this going to be in a way where it's like, oh, this has changed enough where it's kind of like, oh, you can definitely close it off. Like, they're going to shift it enough. I thought maybe, like, they tacked on enough of an ending for things that kind of be, like, a little bit, you know what I'm trying to say? I thought they were kind of going down that lane, but nevertheless. I even love the element of, like, wait, we're going back super far in the past before the situation of them being, you know, back in high school, them being way before they even had their powers, and having them kind of relive their younger days and stuff like that. I love Carolina being like, oh, don't open the locker, don't open the locker. It's like, oh. But I'm sure also, you know, hearing and seeing Gert affected her like it did Chase, you know. The whole Molly situation, you know. I'm sure hearing Gert again and, you know, looking like, oh yeah, that's kind of where that's, you know, where this all kind of started for me, like my wanting to be a part of the squad and everything, even back then. I thought that was kind of a neat element. And even the whole thing with Alex and Nico, and Alex is like, oh, is it worse that, it's like, oh, why does that seem like that's worse than I remember? And Nico being like, is it worse that I don't remember it at all? And Alex goes, she's like, yeah, I figured as much. I just thought that was such a, like, oh, that sucks. And obviously there's a whole thing. I love that the fact is these are older versions of themselves, and they're like, once again, I just love that whole situation of they are running around their high school, but obviously they look like older versions of themselves, and it's like, oh, hey, Alex, here, like, get on board, like, oh, this is the hacking thing, and it's like, wait, that's the day? And he's in the back of the bus, and they're like, whoa, and then young Alex from that time steps up, he's like, whoa, wait, who's that? And it's like, wait, he's like, Alex, and it's like, no, I'm Alex, no, that's you from the future, and he's like, I get contacts? I love that. That's what he held on to the most. But luckily, Nico was able to kind of put everyone to sleep, and it's like, yeah, let's kind of wipe everyone's memories and stuff like that. I was like, okay. So just nothing's ever clear cut. And I even like the conversation from 2022 Alex and 2028 Alex, the whole conversation of like, oh, the fact of the matter is, we both know what we did in that dark dimension. It's like, we killed our mom. It's like, that thing wasn't our mom. But Alex, from furthest future, Alex is like, yeah, but at the time we didn't know that when we put it. Like, if we knew that, that'd be different. But at the time we thought that was our mom. So, like, obviously things shifted. It's even interesting because Chase kept him from talking about some other stuff of like, things changed. Like, it's like, oh, you want to call me the traitor? But then I guess it's like Chase did a lot of stuff that because it was interesting because like he even talks about the mark on his neck. It's like, never trust a guy named Victor, and he's just like, wait, your dad did that to him? It's like, no, kind of say I guess some other dude named Victor ended up doing that to him, the scar on his neck and everything. So they have captured Alex, but now it's the whole thing of like, well, they send their Alex back to the original time. It's like, hey, use this opportunity, take what you know, that what you become, try not to become that. And Alex is like, yeah, I'm gonna take this and try to be a better version of myself, which almost all that kind of gets undone anyway. But I guess like, in some semblance of a future, I think it kind of shows, if you look at it, space-time continuum, you would assume Alex was not successful because the fact of the matter is future Alex should have disappeared or at the very least changed. So I think despite Alex going back, knowing what he was going to become, trying not to become it, he still ended up becoming it anyway, which I think also gets into that timeline, timey-wimey stuff of like, whoa, is time set in stone? Is everything inevitable, or can you change things? I mean, obviously aspects to the show that you can change, but certain aspects it also seems like time has a way of almost course correcting, where it almost seems like certain things were almost destined to be, they're going to be, so I thought that was kind of an interesting element. But obviously they go back, all of them make the decision that they're going to go back to that night that Gert died, simply because it's like that's what was always Chase's plan. So it's like, if I die that night and Gert doesn't, it kind of fixes everything, because Gert's death kind of ended up breaking them. Especially because it comes up later on about like why Nico left, because Nico ended up talking to herself of like, I get it, you want to like pull your, like, you don't have to leave, stand by Carolina, like stay here, don't kind of run away just because you're afraid, because I think losing Gert kind of made her go like, I wasn't powerful enough. So it's like you feel like you have to choose between strength or love, darkness or light. You don't have to stay and fight, don't, because Nico kind of just ran away from it. She ran to strength rather than choosing love, and she kind of was so afraid of the darkness in her, like, because much like Carolina's fear of it and everything, like, Nico had her own fears of it too. I think it was just the whole thing of not really wanting to admit it. That's at least how I feel about it. I actually wasn't expecting them to full on interfere the way that they did, like all of them coming in together and being like, holy crap, because even Alex is saying, wait, is that me over there? And even Chase getting knocked out by future Chase. And, he ends up dying in the process, of saving Gert. Because even like, oh, Gert, the fact is you die here, like, do not come out of his room. Let me do this for you. Hell, even like when they were back in high school and stuff like that, he's telling the dudes that are friends of his, he's like, leave her alone. She has anxiety. And he's like, wait, how did you know that? He's like, it's obvious. She's like, wait, it's obvious? He's like, oh, that's Wilder. I got to go after him. And I love that moment, dude. It was just kind of like, because I'm sure for him, he was happy to see Gert again. Because at that point in time, he hadn't seen Gert in years. Because once again, this isn't 2022 Chase, this is 2028 Chase. So, because the message that was sent to Victor was chased from like 10 years into the future. That was like the whole point, so showing that like season 1 of the show takes place, it technically I guess that cusp between 2017 and 2018. Regardless, once again, getting kind of caught up in the dates and stuff like that, but still, in the end, it kind of was all worth it in the end, because it's like, oh, I saved, Gert. We were able to stop. Obviously, we were still able to stop more. And I like that line from Chase where it's kind of like, you wonder why we fight so much. The fact of the matter is, you tell us to kind of follow your example. And the fact is, I repeated myself there, sorry. I wish I could remember. I really liked what Chase had said, because it was almost like a very kid thing to say, like, even though it wasn't a kid, but it's just kind of like, because you guys have it so set in your mind that you know what everything is, that you kind of know best, when in actuality you don't. So, like I said, I'm butchering it, and I actually love the line. I was like, oh, that's actually a pretty deep representation of like the Runaways versus their parents to a certain extent, because it's like all these adults kind of telling you what they're doing and what they're, it's like what we're doing is for the best or whatever, like they have your best, in mind and stuff like that. But still, it is sad to see Chase die. It's also got to be hard, because it's like, for Gert too, because it's like, no matter what, you're seeing a version of Chase die, and even Chase seeing himself dead, it's like, wait, is that me? And so it's like, whoa. And then all of them are disappearing, and future Nico and future Carolina and Molly are there. And Molly's like, I got my sister back, and it's like Carolina and Nico, and, Nico's trying to apologize at the last second, saying like, Carolina, it's like, no, I know, like, the fact of the matter is, no matter where we end up, promise me you'll always find me. And she's like, I promise. So that was kind of a neat element to it where I'm like, holy crap. I was like, huh. And I guess the whole thing of like, everything kind of being resolved, and then we end on that situation of like, hey, we're all happy again. I was like, oh, I guess everything. I was like, oh, I guess we're going to kind of end this on a happy note. But it's like, nope. Future Alex left present day Alex a note about infiltrate your dad's business, hide Mancha, and then 3, kill Nico. Because I guess he found out that Nico is the one that tried to kill him in the bomb. Maybe. Is what he found out. Or maybe it's supposed to be the fact is kill Nico now, because if you don't kill her now, the fact is she becomes so much stronger later on. I mean, it almost makes you think that self-fulfilling thing of, potentially this Alex grows up to the Alex that's in 2022, knowing what he knows in 2019. He played along knowing where he was going to end up, or maybe not. Obviously future Alex 2028 Alex coming all the way back was what was necessary to kind of facilitate him still going down that path, but obviously pushing him down that path a little bit earlier. So it seems like where it seemed like he might have failed, he might have succeeded, which we didn't see this. It's I don't know how to, it breaks my heart a little. It makes me feel a little happy yet sad, because it's like, it would have been this happy moment, like seeing them kind of walk away, obviously knowing this is the final episode and everything. It's very symbolic and beautiful, but at the same time, knowing that obviously that's a major cliffhanger to be like, so what is Alex going to do in the grand scheme of things? It wasn't meant to be open-ended like it was. Like I said, like it being canceled, they went into this having the intentions of, hopefully having a 4th season. That's why I'm kind of wondering, would that have all been solved in another season, or would that have been like a season 4 and 5? Because obviously, like I said, the whole Gaborum thing, I feel like that would have circled back around in some shape or form. But obviously, I feel like the 4th, even if they did it for one more season, it probably would have all been about the Alex storyline. So that's definitely where my mind is with all of that. Like I say, it kind of actually made me a little sad, because I watched all of it last night, which was Saturday. Well, it's technically Sunday morning. Me finishing everything up, and just the entire time I was legitimately laying in my bed, like thinking about it. I'm like, I don't know. It kind of broke my heart, because I was almost filled with this sadness. Because I always felt like that when the show ends, but especially this ending, because it almost seems like, oh, it's so hopeful, yet at the same time so dreadful of an ending. It's like, that's actually kind of it's almost like, I won't spoil Preacher. Preacher has a bummer of an ending to a certain extent. I mean, you can look at it in a beautiful way. This, like I said, it was a symbolic beauty to it. Like, oh yeah, this group of friends, it's like, oh, everything worked out because Gert's back. But it's like, not everything, because it still potentially goes down the route that Tandy saw, technically, because of like, Alex is kind of messed up, and seeing that message from his future self is like, well, my future self must know something I don't know. So like I said, you can definitely, a lot of it is resolved, but obviously there's so much left open, and you can definitely tell they had plans for a 4th season. I would have loved that opportunity, but it's an opportunity we're not going to get. I can't even be hopeful, like, oh, maybe things will change. It's like, no. The fact of the matter is, Marvel TV going the route it's going, there is no, like, obviously this is the end. Literally the last show amongst the Marvel TV shows is going to be Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is coming back for its final season anyway, but still, it's kind of, I think maybe that's another reason why it makes me sad, because like, that means there's only one show. Like, it's literally like the Netflix thing of like, one by one the show's getting canceled, and going from like, yep, Punisher's done, to like, yep, this is definitely Jessica Jones, final season has to be expected. So, so it just, I don't know. I think that's what kind of all hit me at once, made me feel the way it did. I love this ride, and kind of taking this ride with these characters. I've really loved and enjoyed this show, and just, like I said, it has a satisfying enough ending, but you can definitely tell there's definitely room for more. So it doesn't leave you as satisfied, because it's like, there's so much left open in it, especially because you don't know where Alex's story would have taken him, and what that meant in the grand scheme of things for everyone, Was what Tandy saw going to be something that came to be? Like I said, it kind of undid 2022 Alex's chance to try and do better. But like I said, inadvertently, he must not have done better, considering the fact is 2028 Alex still existed at that point in time. But maybe, once again, maybe this kind of has a Legends of Tomorrow type of thing, where the timeline isn't an immediate thing. Well, no, that can't be the case, because the moment Chase died, they all disappeared. So it should have been like an instantaneous thing. So I think that spoke volumes. But obviously, in the grand scheme of things, because of the space-time continuum, you were always meant to go back in time to that moment to, change change things, so Alex's changes were undone automatically anyway. Which, it's the chicken and egg type of situation. I mean, obviously it's not, but it's a perpetual loop, you know. That's kind of how, you know, time travel situation works. But regardless, that's just where my mind is with all of this. Like, like I said, the ending leaves you with some complex feelings, just because like you're satisfied yet at the same time you're not, because obviously there's a lot that you don't get answered either. That's why I'm always curious with stuff like this, where I'm wondering, like, were certain scenes added? Because I feel like it was all said and done of like, oh, this is going to be it. We're not going to do anything else, especially when it's canceled. But part of me wonders, like, do they ever go back last minute? Because there's a certain show I watched, I'm like, I'll go ahead and talk about Castle. That ending at the very end of Castle, I'm like, that seemed like something they filmed later on. That obviously was never the intention, because they didn't know they were going to get canceled. So I'm wondering, but I feel like the way Hulu packaged this is like, obviously you get the entire season all at once. I don't know if it lent itself open. So I think this was always meant to be the direction it was supposed to go. Obviously, it was supposed to be a lead into potentially, season 4. But so, like I said, my brain, because, I never know the full, like, I don't look behind the magic, It's like, oh, this is TV and movie making and production. Like, I don't look behind that too much, because I feel like it'd take away a little too much from the shows regardless. But still, it was just something that was kind of floating in the back of my mind in the grand scheme of things. So, like I said, I'm just kind of sad to see this kind of, come to an end like this. And I'm, knowing that it's the end of this version of Marvel TV. And it's always been my thing of like, at the very least, I want this continuity. All of this, ranging from the Netflix shows, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., to Cloak and Dagger, to this, all kind of being packaged into the MCU. Whether you reboot these, whether you like take these properties and continue them, that will most likely never happen. But at the very, very least, because if you don't, it kind of makes all this like, but it makes it almost seem like these shows don't, like, to me, it makes it feel like they don't matter, because it's like, oh yeah, because they've always been in their lane of like, well, we don't know where we stand in a grand scheme of the continuity, because the MCU is kind of doing its own thing, we're kind of doing our own thing, but now, like, obviously the shows are going forward are going to be more tuned with the MCU. And so, like, me personally, even if you don't 100% do something with it, at least having that continuity exist, at least knowing it all took place in the same universe, I kind of would want you to pull that in. That's always been what I wanted at the very least. Because at the very least, that could potentially lead to you, hey, rebooting things. Like, necessarily, maybe it's not necessarily you doing it with a new cast, but if you would most likely reboot any of these properties, you do it with a new cast. It probably won't be like a continuation reboot. I personally would prefer that, because these versions of these characters are what I'm used to, and these are what I like. Once again, I know I'm in a minority of this situation. Some people are probably like, nah, reboot those characters. I don't care as much about them. It doesn't matter. Because I'm wondering, I feel like because these properties are so now, like, they're probably less likely to tackle them later on in the MCU's continuity. So that's why I'm just like, go ahead and take this continuity now. But then, there's all these multiple shows come, all that continuity coming with it. So that turns into a whole thing in itself. Like I said, this is something I've talked about on multiple occasions. So I just figured, go ahead and add this in here as well. So, like I said, it was still just, a very, nice ride, and with this situation, I, like with any, ending, I always try to say, like, I wish everyone from cast and crew to, I wish them the best in their future endeavors, so I didn't even talk about this at the time. I meant to bring this up. Alex being possessed by the son actually kind of reminded me a little bit, because the actor, I think his name is Renzi, the actor who plays Alex, he was in Teen Wolf. He kind of went through a certain thing, because there was a creature, I forgot what the creature's name is, but the final main antagonist, technically, of Teen Wolf could shapeshift into people. It chose Alex, and he was kind of behind the scenes doing some evil stuff, so it kind of made me think of that. It's like, oh, you kind of get to play an evil character again to a certain extent, and it was just kind of interesting, because I think this was his first role after Teen Wolf, I think. I could be wrong. Regardless, it was just kind of floating in the back of my mind, but I figured I'd just go ahead and throw that at the end there. So, but yeah, I talked way too much, so I do apologize, but really, that's finally all I have to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.